Hey everybody, Goo-Man here with part 6 of the new Monster Roundup series for Monster Hunter Wilds, where I look at all the new monsters who were introduced in this title. I'm talking about what I liked, what I disliked, and anything else that comes to mind. We are almost done with the series. Today, of course, we are covering Jin Dahaad and Arkveld, which are two of my favorite monsters in this game, so I'm very excited for this one. It is not required to watch the previous videos in the series, however, the content is there if you want to watch my take on the roster of new monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds. Consider hitting the like button, saying nice things in the comments, and subscribing to my channel for more room temperature opinions about video games. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you found this video, and I hope you're able to take something away from it. And before we get started, Editor Goo-Man here to make a comment. This was an exciting video for me to make, so not only is the video way longer than usual, there are multiple places where I start on a topic and kind of forget to finish it, the most important topic being the overall difficulty of Monster Hunter Wilds. I think this is an important topic that deserves a thoughtful analysis, but in this video I kind of declare that the game is easy and gloss over it. With the discourse around difficulty being what it is, I wanted to apologize for my thoughtless approach to the topic. I do have my takes on the difficulty of the game, but I want to save that for a future video, so sorry guys, those parts in the video might come across sloppy. Alright, let's get to it. So first up is Jin Dahaad. He's this massive, imposing creature. You kind of get to see him a couple of times throughout the story before you get the full hunt, which I think is pretty neat. But anyway, I'm a big fan of Jin Dahaad. I think his popularity in the community is well deserved. I enjoy the fight itself a lot, but more than that, I really enjoy what this fight represents in terms of sort of the overall game direction, design, what Capcom is trying to do with some of these big spectacle fights. If Wilds is your first Monster Hunter game, you may not be aware of this, but he takes a lot of inspiration from a fairly popular fight from Iceborne. There's a big event fight called Safi'jiiva, which is the grown-up version of the last boss of the main Monster Hunter World storyline. I'm not sure if I have the story exactly right, but apparently the younger form, Xeno'jiiva, was so popular that Capcom decided to kind of bring him back in a way, like a grown-up version of it, and create an entire event quest for him. And a lot of the mechanics you see in that fight actually make a return here, which is, I think, was a great call, just because it gives you a chance to engage with some unique mechanics without being locked out of mandatory group play, in a way some of the fights were in World and Iceborne. And for this video, of course, I'm using the bow. I know I've been using the sword and shield of the lance a lot, but I've just been playing with the bow recently and having a lot of fun. And for a monster this size, I feel like just being able to stay at range and show off kind of what's happening was a bit more valuable for the sake of the video. One of the things this fight makes really clear is sort of the multi-stage nature of this encounter. If you open the map, you can clearly see multiple sections, multiple different arenas. And at certain intervals throughout the fight, Jin Dahaad will move, and each time he does, it introduces some new gameplay aspect that you have to engage with to get through it. So the first stage of the fight, super simple. There are very few distractions. It's all about the basic moveset of the monster, as well as kind of forcing you to deal with the cold mechanic in this game, which does work a little bit differently from previous titles. So if you have a weapon that lets you block or do some fancy dodges, it's a great place to kind of warm up. Make sure you're prepared for the rest of the fight, and you can rest assured that as Jin Dahaad moves to new areas of the map, the fight's going to get that much more complicated. So the second zone is a neat little arena. It's in some kind of Wyverian ruins. Of course, a pod of Hirabami have made its nest here. I feel like the first time we come through here, I think the cat makes a call out about triggering the fight with the Hirabami as a way to do a little bit of extra damage to Jin Dahaad, which I think is a neat little idea. And this is a cold area, so you want to make sure that anytime your heat buff is worn off, I'm gonna grab one of these bugs. Those bugs are great. The buff protects you from losing stamina in the cold, as well as giving you a nice burst of healing. And having those bugs are nice. I do appreciate them, but it does trivialize the environmental effects of this game to the point where I don't really see a point in having them at all. I don't think I've used more than like 4 of the actual hot and cold potions in the entire time I've played this game. Most of its arenas are littered in little interactables, parts of the map that you can bring on this guy's head. They do make the fight a lot easier, I think. The big attacks do hurt a lot, but they're also some of the more obviously telegraphed moves in the game. The frost breaths are really scary to get hit by, because in this game when you take enough cold damage, it roots you in place, which gives the monster a chance to kind of punish you really heavily for it. And this guy can kind of wipe you out in a hit or two. Yeah, Jin Dahaad uses the ice element really well in that regard. It's actually pretty exciting to see a monster this big and this mechanically important to be ice instead of something else, because most monsters that typically exist in this scale you tend to use fire. It's really nice to see the devs take advantage of, the other attack types that exist in this game. The second stage of the fight, not too different from the first. Jin Dahaad doesn't do anything particularly new, but you do gain access to more environmental effects like the falling boulders and stuff like that. Stage 3 though is kind of where the fight becomes real. If you take a look around the arena, there are so many more interactive spots, sort of laid out in a very peculiar way. This move I don't enjoy particularly very much. I don't think it's all that interesting, where he snakes up to the overhang and then just blasts you. And you kind of have to let him do it 3 or 4 times before the pillar is damaged enough for you to bring it down. Yeah, I don't find that mechanic particularly fun or difficult. It's not super meaningful. I think it acts more of like a pace reset more than anything, because you do have to put your weapon away to interact with the map. Yeah, that attack hurts a lot. So this is the big move that I think surprised quite a few people. If Wilds is their first one, this was very similar to a mechanic from Safi Jiva that I mentioned earlier, where he winds up a big, like, world-ending fire breath attack that if you get hit by it, it was just a one-shot kill. And the idea is that throughout the fight, rocks drop from the ceilings, you have to hide behind it. And then, so the idea here, obviously, is that if you're able to lure Jin Dahaad beneath one of those, you can drop the giant ice chunks on him to do some extra damage, as well as create a safe spot for you to hide behind. The first time he did that, it caught me by surprise for sure. It was definitely something I had to react to very quickly, because it looked like a big one-shot attack, but then seeing the interactive spot kind of clicked immediately. I thought it was a clever move. So stage 3 has a lot of interactive objects you can bring down on him. Does a ton of extra damage for free. So that's a lot of mechanics talk for a fight that you've probably done a million times. So what I find most interesting about Jin Dahaad is how metallic it looks. Like, it looks like its body is covered in armor, like someone went through the trouble of making form-fitting armor. So I just looked this up, actually, while I was getting smacked around. Those ridges, like those rib-like structures, they're actually organs that cool its body. That's why whenever it uses some of its bigger frost breath and the ice-generating attacks, like throughout its body, the ridges kind of light up. It's like a reverse heat sink, like from in your computer. I think what's happening is anytime the ridge is lit up orange like that, it's absorbing the coldness from the atmosphere as kind of a way to regenerate the ice it's expelling. Like just how you would breathe in when you're out of oxygen. It looks like it's reloading. It'll do the ice breath at you, and then the organs activate to kind of replenish its frost, basically. So that's pretty neat. That's not something I thought about at all before making this video. I will say making these videos have greatly increased my appreciation for this game. Stage 3 introduces the big run-ending one-shot attack, but it gives you a nice big arena to kind of deal with it. I have seen the videos of people dodge stepping through all that. I'm not brave enough to try it in a video. So that attack generates a lot of frost, and then the organs had to activate to pull more ice from the atmosphere, and now it's ready to go again. For the longest time, I thought those ridges on its back were just kind of random pieces of metal that somehow appeared there. I did not know they were organs. I do wonder if breaking them makes the fight easier in any way, because it does mean that it's going to have a harder time absorbing the coldness from the atmosphere. So at this point, I've broken all the cooling organs, so I'm just kind of keeping an eye on whether any of the mechanics change or if it's just purely aesthetic. Like, the damage you're doing at this point in the fight kind of lines up with the monster getting exhausted. So any effect to its moves being a little less scary might just be an artifact of fighting it for a long time. So I'm actually going to let it recover a little bit, get enraged. So he's enraged now. We'll see if anything changes. I do like the design of this monster a lot. Just a big lizard with armor. What's not to like? I want to say the breath attacks look smaller, but I think that's just wishful thinking. I think I'm just reading into it. You can see the organs trying to activate, like they're spreading out a little bit, but it's not doing a whole lot. Oh, this is a little different. I think that was supposed to be the big one-shot mechanic, but it can't gather enough of the, it can't gather enough ice to kind of create the little explosive cocoon. That's okay. So maybe breaking its parts does actually affect combat in some way. That's very cool. I would not have noticed if I wasn't making this video. Mostly because the fight would be over at this point. I'm kind of dragging it out for the sake of research and for you guys. So we'll let it run for a little bit longer and see if that's correct. I love the animations of it just kind of running up the walls. I hope Jin Dahaad is a sign of things to come for Wilds. I hope that this isn't the last time we see a fight like this. I will say the fight is pretty simple, but it's such an elegant mix of the spectacle, just purely based on its size, and how engaging the mechanics are. Like when it runs at you and up the wall, you know, it's not a new mechanic, right? Like other monsters will run at you. But because of the size of this monster and because of the way the arenas are laid out, you know, the momentum carries it forward. It's such a small thing that doesn't necessarily add to the fight, but it reinforces how big it is. Like as it runs up the wall, the camera pans out a little bit so you can kind of see how big it is. It adds a sense of perspective to the scale of the monster, and it's such a neat small thing that this fight does that I appreciate so much. And also, if you notice that when it does its normal sort of ice breath attacks, the ones that it doesn't have to charge up, like it comes out like a beam, the range on that is a lot shorter than the one sort of more conal ice blast that it does wind up for. So this move, that move will, there is no range limit. It will hit you on the other side of the map. However, the sort of the less impactful ice beams, you can outrange. You can, if you're standing far enough away, you can avoid it. The fact that there's a distinction is meaningful to me. Like the scale of what it does matters. The fact that it has to wind up for an attack makes it more dangerous. And again, it's like, it's not something that you may notice, or, you know, it might not even matter in the grand scheme of things because you're going to be up close and fighting it anyway. So you know, the maximum range of its breath attack doesn't quite matter all that much. And while I'm talking, it went ahead and did its... And I think I can safely confirm that by breaking its parts, you actually prevent it from doing the big one-shot mechanic, which is good because this is the final stage. Assuming these rocks don't come back after you use them, you do have a finite number of opportunities to hide behind the one-shot mechanic. So the idea there is that if you're not on top of going for its parts or just finishing the monster, there will come a time where you don't have enough rocks to hide behind to avoid the one-shot mechanics to the point where you may actually just get a game over if you're not quick about it. Now, this is not a long fight. You can finish it in somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. And then that kind of speaks more to the overall difficulty of this game. Like, walls are designed into these fights. It just doesn't take it very seriously. I think people's complaints about the difficulty in this game are very valid. I'm not confident if the average player exactly understand what the exact problem is regarding difficulty, but I think the complaint is valid, where, yeah, it does feel easy. It definitely does. I think this fight deserves a master rank kind of tune-up, as well as even an arch-tempered version. I don't think we're gonna get an arch-tempered version of every Apex monster, because at this point we know that Raidao is coming in a couple weeks, but I don't think all the other sort of new Apexes are gonna get that treatment. I think this one deserves it. I'm fairly confident Arkveld will get one eventually, but I think Jin Dahaad, more than any other monster, deserves a difficulty tune-up. Not just because I think being easy takes away from the fight at all, but more because what I appreciate about sort of the minor details in the fight are enhanced by a sense of danger. So in a way, as a sort of summary, I love this fight. I think in its current form, this fight is great. I think this fight will be even better if it was harder. I think that's kind of my final take on Jin Dahaad. It's held back by the difficulty of this game, I think. Like, I don't think we've seen the full design intent or the developer vision of Jin Dahaad. I think given the opportunity to really challenge you mechanically, this monster has the potential to be like an easy top 5 contender of all time. Like the way like Nergigante is from World and Iceborne. And by that I mean like community polling and the popularity contests and all that stuff. I think Jin Dahaad does really have a potential to be an all-time great. I just think right now it's held back by how little it requires of you. So I think that's enough said on Jin Dahaad. We'll move on to the next one. I do hope we get to see him again. I don't even want like a new variant or anything. I think he's perfect the way he is. I just want Capcom's kind of master rank take on this fight specifically. All right, so we are finally here. We're finally looking at the narrative linchpin of this entire game, Mr. Arkveld. And now that I'm in this fight, he looks extremely small. I got a little baby Arkveld. All right, that's fine. We're back with the sword and shield. Is such a fun duel for me. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I posted a video from the beta where I was able to take down the beta version of the Guardian Arkveld, which was pretty difficult. We had 20 minutes to do a fight that was tuned for high rank using low rank gear. It took, gosh, it took a while. It took me a good day and a half, 2 days to actually be able to beat the fight at all. But it felt good to do. But having spent so much time, it also meant that I was very intimately aware of its entire moveset when the full game came out. So unfortunately, this fight is, to me, this is one of the easiest fights in the game. But the fact that I still enjoy this fight, I think, is a testament to just how good it is. So we'll get the ecology stuff out of the way. So in case you're a cutscene skipper and you just have no idea what's happening, this is the biological Arkveld, the real one. He's the real boy, which is different from the version you fight in the beta and at the end of low rank. That one is the Guardian form of the Arkveld. You only fight it once in the game. So he's the version that was created by the ancient Wyverians and shares similar properties to the other Guardian fights. And of course, once you get started into high rank, it was kind of revealed that somehow the Guardian Arkveld was able to reproduce before we took it down. And by the time you're able to fight it in high rank, you learn that this Arkveld was able to achieve kind of free will, kind of making it like its own life form, which means that the species is been resurrected, basically. It's no longer an extinct species that exists in the world of Monster Hunter, which does have some interesting lore implications. I use that phrase quite a few times in this series. I don't know if anybody finds that annoying. And I am saying these things fully acknowledging that none of this really matters in a Monster Hunter game. It's fun to speculate because there's so little effort put into the story of these games, to where we kind of have to make it up as we go. And that's just kind of been the staple of a Monster Hunter game for pretty much as long as it's existed. But it does mean that, like, if an extinct species of monster is able to come back, like, we can now set up stories for the future or kind of justify certain monsters that we haven't seen in multiple generations. Like, I never personally played Monster Hunter 4, so I've never fought monsters like the Dalamadur, which many people have pointed out. Its skeletons are actually, like, in other Monster Hunter games. I believe the Rotten Vale in Monster Hunter World is based around the corpse of a giant Dalamadur. In Monster Hunter Wilds, if you go into the arena map, people have pointed out that the skeletal remains of a Dalamadur is kind of present in the map. So the remnants of that monster exist, but we haven't seen it since 4. And now we do know that there is some narrative connection between Wilds and 4 because of characters like Gemma and Fabius, who are technically returning characters. So it may not necessarily be the case that monsters like the Dalmador are necessarily extinct, but if we're in a situation where, like, the hunter in the previous game hunted the last of a certain species of monsters, well, now we have a mechanism built into the universe that can potentially bring them back. So now there's no excuse. We gotta see those old monsters. We gotta bring the Plesioths back, you know? I'm kidding. Please never bring that monster back. No, that's not even a good joke. I'm so sorry I said that out loud. So I do have some Arkveld theories, but before I get lost in the sauce there, I'll cover more of the mechanics. So that's probably the reason why you're playing this game in the first place. So the big centerpiece of this fight, obviously, are the chain-like appendages that he does use as weapons. So the Arkveld does fit my favorite criteria of monsters that use body parts like human weapons. I think I mentioned that in part 4 of the series. But to reiterate, I love monsters that use like parts of their bodies like we use our tools. I think it's a little bit silly, but I think it's so cool. So the way the Hunter Journal describes the chains, essentially, you probably won't see it in this footage, but anytime there's some inclement weather effect, like the thunderstorms in the plains, you will see occasionally that a lightning strike will come down and hit Arkveld, but instead of hurting him, it looks like it's powering him up. So that is the effect of elemental conversion, which, if you're aware of armor skills, that is one of the mechanics of that armor set. But the idea is that it absorbs general elemental effects like fire and lightning and then converts it into dragon energy. So that's what he does. That's what makes him stronger. That's also how the armor skill works. Anytime you take any elemental damage, it essentially powers up the armor and converts that into extra dragon element attack. So there is like a biological basis to that armor skill, in case you didn't know. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm not sure if this is something anybody else really thinks about, but something I do kind of appreciate about just overall consistency in monster design is that, like, what makes the Arkveld special regarding his moveset are the little chain things. So anytime he uses like an elemental attack, it's always with the chains, right? He doesn't breathe the dragon element like some other monsters do. There's plenty of monsters in the overall roster that can do that. Like Ebony Odogaron can do that. There's a monster called the Savage Deviljho that can do that. So it's there isn't like some kind of ecological imperative that says you can't, internally create dragon element and then expel it from your body. That definitely does exist. It does work like fire in that way. But for Arkveld specifically, it's more to do with absorbing elements from the environment and then converting it into a form that it can use. Right, so like it can't breathe fire, but it can absorb fire or lightning through its chains and then convert it into a form of energy that it can use. But it does have to come from its chain whips. So I'd be curious to know if there's anything happening like inside its body, like inside its organs and stuff, if there's anything special going on. Arkveld does like to use its grab attack quite a lot. It does have a pretty peculiar tell, and for the most part, you should be able to avoid it just with a sidestep, like just a dodging to the sides. But it is quite dangerous. You'll probably want to keep some kind of slinger ammo handy throughout the fight if you're not too used to this monster yet. So when the Arkveld is charged up, it likes to do this massive 3-hit combo where he sweeps to its right and then to its left, and then finally it'll slam down with its full body. That last hit hurts a lot. If you kind of mistime a dodge or something and you get hit by one of the first 2 attacks, I recommend just staying on the ground. That's probably the easiest way to avoid like the big final hit. It's definitely a valid strategy. Just taking the lesser hit, get knocked down, and then it'll help you avoid damage by doing that. So one of my previous videos was about some of my favorite fights in Monster Hunter Sunbreak, and one of the things that I enjoy most about those fights is sort of the fact that they kind of break away from the standard normal state of the monster and then the enraged state. And then they have like this secret third form where sort of the nature of the fight kind of changes. And Arkveld does check that off as well. So not only is Arkveld a weapon user, he's also a bit of an aura farmer. He has his normal state where he's just kind of wimpy, has the most basic attacks with his chains, and then he has the powered up state where he's angry but not quite enraged. His chains get powered up and split off, and then that's kind of where like he gains new follow-ups to a lot of his attacks. Whenever he slams down with one of his arms to kind of hit you with the chain, there's like a follow-up attack with the second part of his chain. So on top of this state, he also has the enraged state. Usually he's enraged during his charge-up state, so maybe you can argue it's a fake third form, but I'm gonna count it just so he can check all the boxes for like what I would consider my favorite fights in the game. And he definitely is. I think Arkveld is my favorite fight in Wilds. So compared to Jin Dahaad, I do feel like Arkveld is a little bit more mechanically complicating as a fight. That said, I don't feel like there's any kind of unfair trickery or weird timings to most of its attacks, at least worth talking about. I think the moveset is really easy to understand once you see it a few times. There are a couple of exceptions. Again, like some of the multi-hitting attacks can get a little annoying. It might be a little difficult to get used to, but it's not going to surprise you about like where the damage is coming from. Like it might take a while to get used to the idea that when he's charged up, his chain whips will usually hit twice, but it's not going to be like a surprise when it happens. Something I did find during the hours and hours I spent just kind of grinding him down in the open betas is the safest place you can stand is actually right in front of its face. If you consider that, you know, most of its deadliest attacks come from its chains, like it needs the space to actually kind of maneuver around and hit you with its weapons. So there's this like giant sort of dead zone right in front of its head where it just can't, it physically cannot hit you. So if you consider that, a lot of his attacks are actually really easy to avoid just by staying extra close to him. So like the big charged up 3-hit combo attack, he usually winds up when you're a little farther away, but if you see that and then kind of charge at him, try to get as close as you can to him, the final hit will not hit you if you're right underneath him. Like he physically cannot deal with that. So just by swinging wildly and swinging hard, it kind of tricks you into assuming that like I'll have to get away. But if you kind of consider how like whips work, it's a lot more dangerous to kind of be at range than right at the handle. This fight kind of works the same way. The closer you are, the less dangerous it is, which feels counterintuitive, and I think that's by design because of how like bombastic all of his attacks look. He'll do these giant windups that turn into massive explosions. So then maybe your first reaction is like, oh, I have to get away, I have to dodge backwards, I have to get to the sides. But the safest place you can be is right underneath them. And I do like that a lot. There's a lot of, it feels like all of the bluster and the fury of the Arkveld battle animation is kind of meant to keep you at arm's length, which just happens to be like his most effective range as well. So don't fall for it, it's a trap. Just stay close to him. He's all bark. I'm sorry if that ruins the fight for you. I think it kind of speaks to the story of Arkveld where, you know, he's kind of trying to fight against his programming and he just wants to live. So his moveset's not about like necessarily killing you, it's more about just keeping you away. It does kind of make sense. Assuming that, you know, I'm kind of correct and this was by design, like I appreciate really the personality of the monster is kind of reflected in its moveset. Another take I have is that whenever it's charged up and is doing these big attacks where it's flailing around, it looks like it's throwing a tantrum, kind of like a child, which again really makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I also really love the visual design of Arkveld. Looking at its head, it looks like a knight's helmet, kinda. If you play a lot of JRPGs, there's some amount of consistency in the way that like the idea of the Holy Knight is represented. And Arkveld really kind of fits in with the pathos of that design. I do think the Arkveld is supposed to sort of visually represent like the pure white knight. And this is kind of where I go into sort of crazy conspiracy theory mode, but if you look at the Arkveld weapons, it uses names from like Arthurian legends and the stories. Like I think the Great Sword is called the Artorias, one of them is called the Lancelot, all that, etc., etc. And you know, I think the most obvious reason is just because it sounds cool. You know, whenever I make a prediction, I think based on like the narrative choices in this game, it's gonna be It's probably gonna be wrong because I don't think there's nearly as much thought put into some of those decisions as I, wish there was. But for the sake of having a little bit of fun with it, like I'm not gonna go too in depth about my prediction in this video. I'll probably save that for its own thing because it does involve Zoshia. I do want to believe that Arkveld looks the way he does, and the weapons are named the way they are, and his story of like achieving free will and all that is supposed to mean something. And then for that reason, I do believe that before the final title update for Wilds comes out, we will see a sort of final form of the Arkveld. And I would love to see that, actually. I would love to see more of this guy. He's so cool. I do love this fight. Arkveld is easily in the top 3 monsters across like 4 games that I've played. Not necessarily because I find the combat super challenging or anything like that, but it's how like the moveset, its visual design, its aesthetics, its story all comes together into this really satisfying end product. And its moveset, I think, is just interesting enough to be satisfying to read correctly, while not being so complicating or so tricky that it's annoying. For me, it hits the sweet spot in kind of encounter design. Do I wish the fight was harder? Sure, I would love to kind of have to sweat a little bit, but unlike Jin Dahaad, I don't feel like the Arkveld is necessarily held back by sort of the overall difficulty of this game. I feel like we were able to experience like the full design intent of the Arkveld. I would definitely love to see more of this fight. I would love for it to come back at some point in the future. I do hope my prediction is correct. It'll be so awesome to see like a fully realized, self-actualized version of the Arkveld, where he gets to be like an actual knight instead of the whips, maybe, a sword and shield. That would be, that would be ridiculous, but also I would also kind of love it, so. But yeah, I truly enjoy this fight. 10 out of 10, S tier, whatever. It does make me happy that this fight is as good as it is, and I want more. Give me more. More. So that's it from me today. Those were 2 fights that I love dearly. Jin Dahaad has simple yet well executed mechanics mixed together with gameplay ideas that aren't super common in the series, and forces you to deal with those mechanics in a way that feels a little bit different from other monsters but still not too unreasonable. And the Arkveld, of course, incorporates a lot of fight mechanics inspired by the narrative ideas it represents in the game, which you don't see too often in Monster Hunter. I think they really nailed that. The next video, of course, will be on Zoshia. I will try to get that out as quick as I can so we can wrap up this series. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and happy hunting!